The sun hung heavy over Dry Rock, Arizona territory, casting molten light across the square. The crowd swelled like vultures circling a carcass, faces smeared with dust and disdain. They gathered at the gallows post in front of Cooper's General Store, squinting through heat waves at the figure bound by rope and humiliation. She stood barefoot in the dirt, wrists tied behind her back, hair matted with sweat and blood. Her dress, once ivory, now bore the stains of the desert. Flies buzzed, and a baby wailed somewhere in the crowd, but Evelyn Ray Collier didn't flinch. Not when the first stone hit her side, not when a bottle shattered near her feet. "Desert rat," someone shouted. "Thieving whore." Laughter followed. Spit hit her cheek. "Why's she not crying?" a voice asked near the back. "Ain't right, they always cry." But Evelyn didn't. Her eyes, deep grey like smoke, scanned the crowd slowly, methodically, as if memorizing faces. Not rage, not fear. Something older, like the silence after thunder. Sheriff Clay Maddox had not yet arrived. In his absence, Deputy Harlan Boone, sweaty, overweight, and clearly enjoying himself, leaned against the post, twirling a toothpick. "You got any last words, miss?" he drawled, mock gentle. "Any tears to wring out?" She said nothing. Her lips were cracked, her tongue too dry to answer even if she wanted, but she wouldn't have spoken. Not to him, not to this town. Boone scoffed, turning to the crowd. "Stole from the mayor's office. Found with forged deeds and a derringer under her skirt. Claimed she was framed." More laughter. "Says she's somebody's wife. That right, darling? Whose wife you supposed to be?" Still silence. Boone grinned. "Didn't think so." Then a murmur rippled through the gathering. Dust rose behind the incoming rider. A black horse, lean and fast, galloped toward them, cutting through heat and whispers. The townsfolk parted as the animal slowed, and Sheriff Maddox swung down, boots thudding against the baked earth. He was tall, his frame worn by war and years under the western sun. A leather duster billowed behind him. His right hand hovered near his revolver as he strode forward. Boone stepped back, startled. "Sheriff, wasn't expecting you till evening." Clay didn't answer. He walked up to Evelyn, studying her, his breath heavy. Something in his expression cracked. "She said she was somebody's wife," Boone offered nervously. "Didn't name who, though." "Might be lying." Clay turned slowly, eyes blazing. The townsfolk quieted. "She's not lying," he said. A long pause. "Because she's my wife." Gasps. One woman fainted. A man dropped his hat. Evelyn didn't blink. Chaos erupted, but Clay stood unmoved, like stone carved from justice and memory. If you want to know why Sheriff Clay Maddox halted the hanging, hit that subscribe button now. The truth runs deeper than Dry Rock's dust, and we're only just beginning. The name rolled off the townsfolk's tongues like a curse now, but once Evelyn Ray Collier had been a name whispered with admiration and longing. Years before the dust had settled into her bones, she was the light of Dry Rock's schoolhouse, a young woman with ink-stained fingers and a heart full of hope. People used to call her Miss Ray back then, never Miss Collier, as her father, Reverend Elijah Collier, insisted on humility. She taught arithmetic and scripture in the same breath, and boys who once threw rocks at dogs started bringing her wildflowers instead. She lived just outside town, in a one-room homestead nestled under a ridge of red rock. Every Sunday, her father thundered sermons from the pulpit, his voice like fire and mercy intertwined. And every weekday morning, Evelyn walked to town with her satchel full of books, her eyes bright with purpose. But all of that ended 5 years ago, the night the preacher was found dead inside the chapel, his Bible torn in two and blood on the altar. Evelyn vanished that same night. No funeral. No goodbye, only the sound of galloping hooves and unanswered questions. Rumors filled the void. Some said she'd run away with an outlaw. Others swore she'd gone mad, cursing the Lord and burying her father herself beneath the cottonwoods. But no one knew for sure. Until now. Tied to the post, Evelyn looked nothing like the girl who once sang hymns with her students or handed out winter bread to orphans. Her eyes were too old, her shoulders too stiff with pain and memory. And yet, a few noticed something else, something beneath the grime and bruises. A thin silver chain lay tucked beneath the collar of her torn dress, barely visible unless the wind lifted it just right. At its center, a charm shaped like a tiny book, a gift perhaps, a symbol. No one dared ask. After Sheriff Maddox's stunning declaration, the town had split into camps. Some clung to disbelief. Maddox must have been tricked. Others whispered about old secrets, past fires rekindled in the dust. But no one, not even the most sharp-eyed old-timers, could reconcile the Evelyn Ray they remembered with the woman now accused of theft and treason. How could someone so good fall so far? Or had she never been good at all? The children she once taught had grown now, looking at her with suspicion instead of affection. Their mothers warned them to stay away. The preacher's daughter was no longer a saint. She was a mystery wrapped in shame. Still, Evelyn didn't bow her head. She stood with the quiet dignity of someone who had faced worse than stones and spit. And though no one spoke to her, they all watched her, waiting for the truth to rise like dust in the wind. One question hovered in every mind. Who was Evelyn Ray Collier now? And why had she come back? Clay Maddox wasn't born into law. He earned it, inch by inch, through fire, war, and the kind of loss that carves a man into something colder than steel. When he rode into Dry Rock 8 years ago, he didn't come looking for justice. He came because there was nowhere else to go. Back then, the town had no sheriff, only gunslingers with badges and a graveyard full of questions. Clay didn't speak much, didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't laugh. But when a rustler pulled a knife in the saloon, Clay shot the blade out of his hand before the glass hit the floor. Folks remembered that, and when the town council begged him to wear the star, he didn't say yes. He just pinned it on and got to work. They didn't know about the war, the battles fought in Tennessee mud or Carolina swamps. They didn't see the limp in his right leg, or the scar that ran from his shoulder to his spine. They didn't know he hadn't slept a full night since Appomattox, but they didn't ask and he didn't offer. What they did know was this: Sheriff Maddox got things done. He put down feuds, drove out bandits, and made Dry Rock a place where children could walk home after dusk without hearing a revolver click behind them. People feared him, respected him, even admired him. But no one really knew him. Until now. When Clay rode into the square that day, saw Evelyn bound to the post like a thief or worse, something inside him twisted, tight, raw, and ancient. He hadn't spoken her name in 5 years, had buried it deeper than a grave. And yet, there she was. Changed, yes, but still her. The townsfolk saw a man reclaiming a scandal. What they didn't see was the storm behind his eyes. Back at the jailhouse, Clay sat behind his desk with the door locked and the lamp unlit. He stared at the wall, jaw clenched, one hand resting on a worn tin star. The memory of her voice echoed in his mind. Not the woman outside now, but the girl who once whispered his name in the dark, when names still meant something. Boone had asked if she was lying. Clay didn't flinch. She wasn't. Because years ago, beneath the cottonwoods, away from every law and vow except their own, Clay Maddox had taken Evelyn Ray Collier as his wife. Quietly. Secretly. Fully. No church, no crowd, just hands held and promises made. And the next day she vanished. He had waited. Weeks, then months, gone mad with questions. But life dragged on, and pain dulled to silence. He had told no one. Not even the stars above knew the truth he carried. Now she was back and everything he'd buried clawed to the surface. But there would be no reckoning yet. Only watching. Waiting. And a promise that this time he wouldn't look away. The night before she vanished, the air was thick with mesquite and wild sage. The moon cast silver light over the ridge, and in a small cabin beyond the town's edge, Evelyn and Clay had stood in silence, hands clasped, breath shared. No preacher, no witnesses, only the wind and the stars to seal their vow. "I don't need a church to know what's true," she'd whispered. "You're the only place I belong." Clay had never been a man of words, but that night his voice had held a tremble she never heard before or since. "I'll find you, no matter what. You have my word." That promise, made in the dark, had lived in his bones for 5 long years. Now, as he watched her from the shadows of his office window, that memory returned with the sharpness of a blade. She hadn't aged in his mind. But now her face carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Her cheekbones were harder, her eyes deeper. Pain had reshaped her. He thought back to their final hours together, the way she had kissed him with fire and desperation, like she knew time was running short. He hadn't asked questions. He'd trusted her. Maybe that was his mistake. The next morning, the cabin was empty. At first, he believed she'd gone to town. When she didn't return by nightfall, worry settled in. Then came the news. Reverend Collier found murdered in the chapel. Evelyn nowhere to be seen. Her horse missing. Blood on the altar, no trail to follow. Clay searched. For weeks he scoured the desert, the hills, the canyons, asked questions in border towns, bribed mercenaries, even rode with bounty men under false names. Every lead led to Ash. In time he stopped asking, but he never stopped remembering. He'd kept the ring she gave him, though it wasn't a proper one. Just a band of leather tied with a red thread. Simple. Honest. Like her. Now, watching her again, dirty, cuffed, branded a thief, he wondered how much of that girl still lived inside the woman, and why, after all this time, she had returned to Dry Rock, to the very place that had swallowed her whole. Whispers stirred in the jail. The deputies speculated. The townsfolk gossiped. Some claimed she'd come to finish what her father started. Others said she was possessed, cursed, a harbinger of ruin. No one dared speak of love, of history, of what Sheriff Maddox might still feel. But Clay felt it. Every breath, every heartbeat. Not longing, not romance. Something deeper. A burning need to understand what had happened that night, and why it had taken 5 years for Evelyn to stand again in his sight, wearing chains instead of white. There were answers buried in the silence between them, and Clay would dig through hell to find them, even if it meant tearing Dry Rock apart piece by bloody piece. Silence fell like a gunshot. "She's my wife," Clay had said, voice steady as the desert wind. It echoed through the square, cutting through disbelief like a blade. The crowd didn't move at first. Then, slowly, the gasps turned to murmurs, the murmurs to shouting. "You lying, Maddox," someone barked from the back. "No damn way, he's protecting her." "Married? To her?" Clay ignored them all. His eyes never left Evelyn. He stepped forward, untying the ropes from her wrists with hands that didn't shake, though his heart pounded like thunder beneath his ribs. Her skin was raw. The rope had bitten deep. She didn't meet his gaze, but didn't pull away either. Deputy Boone stepped forward, uncertain. "Sheriff, sir, this is official town business. You can't just—" "I can," Clay interrupted. "And I am." He turned to the crowd. "This woman is not to be touched. Any man who lays a hand on her answers to me." That was all it took. Chaos burst. "Since when do wives forge deeds and rob officials?" a merchant snapped. "He's lost his damn mind." "Sheriff's in on it. This whole thing's rotten." Clay drew his revolver, not raised but ready. "You want to test me?" he asked calmly. Silence returned, sharp and uneasy. Then a different voice rose, high, brittle, panicked. "Sheriff Maddox," came the drawl of Mayor Jasper Kane, stepping out from the saloon, flanked by 2 guards. "I think the heat's got your brain soft. Ain't no record of no marriage license, no ceremony. Just a known fugitive caught with stolen land grants." Clay's jaw tightened. "You know damn well why there's no record." Kane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You saying you married her off the books? No witnesses? No proof?" "I don't need to prove a thing to you." Kane shrugged, playing to the crowd. "That's not how the law works, Sheriff. She was caught red-handed. Tried to sell land she didn't own. She's under arrest." Clay holstered his revolver. "Then she'll stay under my watch until trial." "You're too close to this," Kane snapped. "You've made it personal." Clay stepped in, close enough for Kane to smell sweat and dust. "You made it personal when you tied her to a post without a fair hearing." Kane held his stare, jaw twitching, then forced a grin. "Fine, she's yours for now. But don't think this town won't remember what side you chose. I'm counting on it." Clay turned and guided Evelyn toward the jailhouse. The crowd parted, still buzzing, split between disbelief and fury. Behind them, the sun dipped lower, and the sky bled gold and rust. Dry Rock had seen its share of tension before, but this was different. The lines had been drawn. And Clay Maddox had just stepped across them. The cell was cold and silent, the kind of silence that begged for answers. Clay stood on the other side of the bars, arms crossed, face shadowed by the flickering lantern. Evelyn sat on the cot, wrists wrapped in bandages, the dried blood still flaking around her knuckles. She hadn't spoken since he brought her in. Not a word. Not until now. "You really told them?" she asked quietly. Clay's voice was rough. They needed to hear it. She looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers slowly. "And what about you? Did you need to say it?" He didn't answer. "You should have left me there," she muttered. "Would have been easier." "No, it wouldn't." She laughed once, bitter, dry. "You think I'm still the girl from the ridge? The one who kissed you under the stars and believed in forever? I know you're not. Then why are you here?" Clay stepped closer, voice low. "Because 5 years ago you vanished, and I buried you. Now you're back and we're in chains. You owe me the truth." She met his gaze finally, and for a long moment there was nothing but the storm between them. "I didn't run," she said. "I was taken." The words hung there, heavy as iron. "That night after we married, I went home. My father was already dead, slumped over the altar. The chapel was dark, but I heard boots behind me before I could scream. 3 men, faces I didn't know." Clay's jaw clenched. "They dragged me out back, threw me in a wagon, rode south. I fought, bit, kicked, clawed. Didn't matter. I was gone before sunrise. They kept me in a shack near the border, weeks. Then I was sold." He didn't breathe. She kept going. "I escaped after 3 months, cut a man's throat in his sleep, took his horse, rode into Mexico, changed my name, worked in kitchens, mended clothes, disappeared into the dust. I survived, that's all I did." Clay's voice was gravel. "Why come back?" She hesitated. "Because Kane sent those men." Clay blinked. "Kane?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "I didn't know it back then. Not until 2 years later when I saw his face crossing the border, talking with the same bastard who bought me. The mayor of Dry Rock is a trafficker, Clay. A murderer. My father tried to stop him. That's why he was killed, why I was taken." Clay stared at her like the world had split. "Do you have proof?" "I had. A journal, letters, names. I brought them with me when I crossed back. But the night I came to town, Kane's men caught me, searched my bag, burned everything." Clay swore under his breath. "But I remember," Evelyn said, eyes hard. "Every deal, every face. And I came back to finish what my father started." The silence returned, deeper than before. Clay unlocked the cell. "We're gonna need more than memory." Mayor Jasper Kane didn't wear his corruption like armor. He wore it like cologne, confident, invisible to the nose that chose not to smell. He was a tall man with gold cufflinks and blood on his hands, though none ever stuck long. For years, Dry Rock had bowed under his smile. Clay knew Kane was crooked. Everyone did. But crooked didn't always mean guilty. Not in a town where power meant survival and proof was as rare as rain. Until now, suspicion had been tolerated like heat, oppressive but constant. Now it was different. Clay spent the night combing through old arrest warrants, property claims, tax records. He found strange patterns, deeds transferring land from dead men to Kane's shell companies, witness signatures repeating across unrelated documents, arrest orders signed by deputies who'd left town years earlier, legal ghosts. Each thread led back to the mayor's office. But Kane was careful, clean. He used others to do his dirty work. Boone, for instance, whose sudden rise in rank came just after Evelyn vanished. Clay found a sealed envelope in the records room marked Private J.C. Inside, a payment ledger, dates, initials, no names, but one entry stood out, 5 years back. The same day Reverend Collier died. The payout, $2,000. Clay didn't sleep. The next morning, Dry Rock stirred with unease. Word had spread. Evelyn Collier was in the sheriff's care. Kane, of course, denied everything. Stood on the courthouse steps with his usual charm, shaking hands, smiling wide. "She's delusional," he told the crowd. "Trauma can twist a mind. I pity her." But Evelyn had returned from hell with more than stories. She knew the mayor's routines, his inner circle. She described the back room of Kane's old saloon, the hidden door, the safe box, the burned letters. Clay had seen it himself once. Thought nothing of it. Now it gnawed at him. Trouble was, the trial was 2 days away. Kane had already filed charges: fraud, illegal entry, attempted sedition. He wanted Evelyn convicted swiftly, without a jury, without noise. Clay stormed into the council meeting, tossed the forged documents onto the table. "This is a setup," he growled. "She's being silenced." Councilman Griggs looked uneasy. "These are serious accusations, Sheriff, but where's your hard evidence?" "I had it," Clay snapped. "Kane's men burned it." "Then it's your word against the mayor's." Kane sat across the room, hands folded, smiling like a fox at a henhouse sermon. "You're letting sentiment cloud your duty, Clay." "I'm doing my duty," Clay replied coldly. "You just don't like what it reveals." Tension crackled. Lines shifted, old alliances strained. Clay left with the council divided. He had 48 hours before Evelyn faced judgment. Kane thought the fire had burned out. He was wrong. It had just begun to rise. Clay didn't trust many people in Dry Rock, but he knew where to find those who'd been cut by Kane's blade and left to bleed quietly. He started with Josiah Bear Lawn, a former bounty hunter who'd once lost his brother in a Kane-led land grab. Bear had retired after a mining accident took his leg below the knee, but he still had his rifles and a memory like granite. Then came Etta Vance, Dry Rock's only doctor, who'd treated gunshot wounds for miners Kane's men had accidentally fired on. Her clinic had been nearly burned to the ground last spring. She said nothing then, but now she tightened her gloves and nodded. Lastly, Tavo, a mute tracker from Sonora. No one knew his real name, but Tavo saw everything and forgot nothing. He'd once tracked a runaway girl through 3 counties and delivered her back to her mother with tears in his eyes. Evelyn had taught that girl to read. Each agreed without question. They met in secret, beneath the dry foundations of the collapsed mill east of town. Clay laid out maps, timelines, positions. Tavo scratched trails in the dust, showing how Kane's men moved shipments of stolen goods through the canyon after sundown. Bear knew where the safe box might be. Kane's old saloon cellar had a floorboard that didn't creak. Etta brought medical records, names, bullet calibers, too many for coincidence. But the clock was ticking. Kane's men grew bold. Evelyn's food was poisoned once. Etta caught it before it reached her mouth. A witness Clay intended to bring vanished overnight. A barn caught fire just across from the sheriff's office. No casualties, just a message. Still, they pushed forward. Bear positioned himself near the courthouse, long gun resting against the broken balcony rail. Tavo shadowed Boone, who had started tailing Clay with a little too much interest. Etta gathered statements from the few townsfolk still brave enough to speak. The night before the trial, Clay returned to Evelyn's cell. Her eyes were clearer now, the bruises fading, but her hands still trembled. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Yes," he replied, "I do." "For your name?" "No," he said softly. "For yours." She looked away, voice breaking. "You'll be hunted," he shrugged. "I've been hunted before." Outside, thunder grumbled across the plains, though no clouds lingered. Dry Rock held its breath, the air sharp with coming reckoning. Clay checked his revolver one last time, then stared at the cracked mirror in his office. Tomorrow wasn't a trial. It was war. The sun had barely touched the horizon when the first shot rang out. It wasn't clear who fired. Maybe it was Bear, spotting a rifle glint in the courthouse window. Maybe it was Boone's nervous trigger finger. But once the silence shattered, Dry Rock exploded into chaos. Kane's guard surged forward, guns drawn. Clay was already moving, pushing Evelyn down behind the witness stand as bullets splintered wood around them. Bear returned fire from the balcony, his aim clean and merciless. Tavo darted like a shadow through the alleys, picking off men with silent precision. Inside the courthouse, Etta had set up a makeshift infirmary behind the judge's bench. A young clerk lay there now, hit in the leg. She didn't flinch, just worked. Clay rose from cover, revolver steady. He didn't aim for the chaos. He aimed for Kane. The mayor was trying to flee through the judge's chamber when Clay caught him at the door. Kane spun, eyes wide, reaching for his pistol. But Clay was faster, one shot, shoulder. Kane screamed, dropped the gun and hit the floor. Clay stood over him, breathing hard. Trial still on. Minutes passed like hours. Gunfire echoed, then slowed, then stopped. When it was over, the courtroom was a battlefield. Blood, smoke, broken glass. But Evelyn was alive. Clay was not unscathed. A bullet had grazed his side, tearing through muscle. He didn't fall, not until it was done. Etta rushed to him, hands red, voice steady. "You're not dying today, Sheriff." He gritted his teeth. "Did we win?" Evelyn answered. "Yes." Kane lay bound, groaning, his shirt soaked crimson. Tavo stood over him, silent and still. Bear limped through the wreckage, reloading as he walked. The townsfolk emerged slowly, silent, shaken, awed. They saw Kane dragged through the dirt like a thief, saw the files Tavo had taken from the hidden cellar laid bare on the courthouse steps. Documents, names, records of land stolen, families ruined, men bought and silenced. Evelyn spoke to the crowd, her voice calm but unyielding. She told them the truth, about her father, about her kidnapping, about Kane's empire built on pain. She held no papers, no exhibits, only truth. And they believed her. The council revoked Kane's authority by sundown. Boone fled town before dusk. Kane would face federal charges, and Dry Rock would never be the same. Clay, bandaged and pale, watched it all from the porch of the jailhouse, Evelyn at his side. She didn't hold his hand, but she sat close. Neither spoke for a long time. The dust had finally settled. But something else was just beginning to stir. A week later, the dust on Dry Rock streets felt different, lighter, as if the town had exhaled after holding its breath for too many years. Kane was gone, dragged away in chains by federal marshals. His empire had collapsed in silence, its men scattered or buried. The courthouse stood intact, but its halls now echoed with voices of townsfolk who'd never dared speak before. Evelyn Ray Collier was free. The charges against her were dropped, publicly, officially. The council issued an apology, but words did little to heal scars earned in chains. Still, she accepted their verdict with the same calm dignity she wore when tied to the post. She didn't ask for justice, she became it. She chose not to leave Dry Rock. Instead, she reopened the old schoolhouse, boarded for years since her disappearance. Dust was swept, windows repaired, books returned to their shelves. Children peeked through the doorway the first morning, unsure. By midday, they filled the benches again. Her voice once more guided numbers and letters and hope. Clay watched from a distance that first day, leaning on a cane now, his wound healing slower than he liked. He saw her smile, truly smile, for the first time in years. It hit him harder than the bullet had. That night, he found her beneath the old juniper tree at the edge of town, the same one where vows were once whispered and promises sealed. She didn't turn when he approached. "You always find me here," she said. He nodded. "You always leave a light." They stood together, the wind moving gently through the branches. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "You did," she replied. "But I came back." Silence stretched, soft and safe. "I'm not the same man," he said, "and I'm not the same girl." He took her hand. Not as a question, not as a claim, just a truth. They didn't speak of marriage or rings or papers. They had been something greater than law and lesser than legend. They had survived, and in Dry Rock that was sacred enough. The town went on, slowly, cautiously, but better, cleaner, stronger. Children laughed again. Men tipped their hats. The mayor's office was quiet, and the sheriff's badge carried weight once more, not of power but of earned respect. Evelyn would never forget the post, the rope, the crowd. But she would also remember the man who stood when no one else did. And in the heart of a quiet desert town, beneath stars that no longer burned with memory, they began again, not with fire, but with peace. Thank you for riding with us through this story of justice, love, and redemption. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more powerful tales just like this one. And don't forget, click on the next video on screen to keep the journey going.